when I came out, my son Cristiano had passed. He was alive for 22 minutes. And then Cruz was immediately put on all the things, hooked up. I didn't even get to see him for a long time. And my husband was with Cruz and I was with Cristiano. When I got into the room, I had my family members there and they were all holding Cristiano, but I felt like I was in this, just like a cloud, and I could just see everybody, but I was not physically there.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. This season is proving to be really great. I mean, they are always great, but I was especially excited just about the topic of how do you find your new normal? And we are all, whether you have a NICU baby or not, we are all trying to figure out, like, how do I find, maybe there's a big change in your life and you're like, how do I find my new normal? I think NICU moms and dads maybe just feel it a little bit differently, but I felt like it might be important for y'all to hear some great reflections from real life parents who are going through the trenches, and perhaps maybe they're going through multiple trenches at the same time. And today's guest, I think she's really going to resonate with many of you. One, she had let me make sure I get this right, 296-day stay in the NICU with one of her babies. Her other baby, they were twins. Her other baby passed away after just 22 minutes of birth. So there is a lot of life that Valerie has lived, and there's so much wisdom. And in today's episode, you're going to hear us talk a little bit about death and grief and dying. You're also going to hear us talk a lot about hope and joy. Because if you have been around the podcast for any length of time, you know that joy doesn't come without suffering, and suffering does not come without joy. So I wanted to give you a little bit of perspective on both. And I think what I love about Valerie's story is that it feels like maybe when you hear it, you think there's no way I could do what she does, what her family does. There's just no way. And then as you hear her speak and you hear her share her story, you start to think, well, maybe there is a way, and maybe I can thrive in my current situation, no matter what it may be. Maybe I too can find a way to find the joy, to see the tiny miracles along the way, and love that this baby has been given to our family, and that I am the best mom or the best dad to be here for this sweet little baby. So my hope is that today's episode helps you figure out how to find your new normal by hearing how someone else found theirs. So my guest today is Valerie Rodriguez. She's a dedicated mom, a beloved friend, and she takes pride in her career as a high school special education teacher. After becoming a mom to her 2 oldest children, a third surprise pregnancy ultimately resulted in Valerie giving birth to twin boys via an emergency C-section at only 23 weeks gestation. It was a heartbreaking goodbye to her son Cristiano just 22 minutes after his birth, and her other son Cruz spent 296 days in the NICU before being released with a full-time 24-hour in-home medical care team facing special needs and challenges way beyond the NICU. So from facing the unknowns of a high-risk pregnancy to walking through the unique challenges of having a special needs child, Valerie longs to encourage and equip others to find joy, and I know she will do just that, no matter what circumstances they may be up against. Valerie and her husband Robert and her 3 children live and prosper. And with that amazing background and a lot of hope, let's get this conversation started. Well, I'm super excited to see Valerie today. You know, I've watched you on Instagram for a little while. I can't remember. I think we have a mutual friend, and they said your name, and then I realized that you had a connection to Hand to Hold, and I was like, I feel like I need to reach out. So I'm glad that we're finally doing this. So thanks for being here.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for having me.
It's always fun to talk to another NICU mom, but especially a NICU mom that has a connection to Hand to Hold. It's like a shared experience there. But I'm gonna actually back up like before your last pregnancy, and I want you to share like what was life like with your husband and your children before the babies came along.
I would have to say it was still a little crazy because my littlest was 2.
Okay.
So, you're in the little terrible 2 trying to get her to sleep, still in diapers sort of thing. It was easy. And I will have to say, whenever she was our last is kind of how we were interpreting, was she was going to be our last. I went to my doctor. I told her, this was my last one. And then that's kind of where the story will begin because, my story is a little bit different than others whenever it comes to, I had an IUD. I mean, this is where the story might begin.
You were definitely done.
I was definitely done. I was, yes.
And so you have this IUD and you're definitely done. And then what happens?
So it was it was in 2018. I'll just begin there. I had this IUD. I thought something is wrong. It just didn't feel right. Something down there. I was having complications. I was bleeding heavily. And I called my husband and I said, hey, I think I need to go to the doctor. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, this has gone on too long. Like something is going on. So I went to my OB and unfortunately she was not there. They didn't end up doing a sonogram just in case. And they said, well, you're pregnant.
Surprise.
Surprise. So they showed me the IUD, and it was, it's like a T shape, right at the T. So I don't know, right at the T was the sac. So what they were saying was they said, it looks like you're having a miscarriage. If you're having these complications, this could be the possibility of a miscarriage. Come back on Friday when your doctor is here and she will remove the IUD. So 2 days go by. She ended up removing the IUD. And when she did, she said, I just want you to remember where the placement was of the IUD because, if you are miscarrying, this will definitely likely cause a miscarry. So it was 4th of July weekend. And I remember that because I needed to get away. So we ended up going to my mother-in-law's house and the kids got to swim, everything feeling like normal,
right?
Even though it
not
really
normal,
wasn't
right?
Not normal. So I had an appointment on Monday because she said, come back Monday. So we went for the weekend just to get away for all of us. And on the journey back home, I just started crying and I was like, something is wrong. Something's wrong. He's like, my husband goes, you want me to pull over? I said, doesn't feel right. Go ahead. And I said, no, don't pull over. Well, my son in the back, he starts randomly throwing up. So we had to pull over at a gas station and I go in there, get all cleaned up. And I'm like, I thought I was having a miscarriage. And a full on miscarriage. And he looked at me. We had our moments together, my husband and I go back on Monday expecting, the bad news,
worst. Yeah.
The worst. I remember I sat in the parking lot because my husband had to watch our kids. So I sat in the parking lot and I was just like, God, I'm here. I don't know what is happening. I'm here. I went inside and I got a sonogram and the doctor came in and was like, well, you're pregnant with twins.
And you were like, and what? I'm sure you're thinking did you get the people wrong? Were you supposed to be in the room next door? What happened here?
I was just in complete shock. I did not know that was a possibility. I don't know what happened. I still am surprised that was something that could happen. Given the place of where the IUD was on the sonogram the first time, it just felt like it was impossible.
Sure.
And then all of the symptoms that I was having. So
how many weeks were you, Valerie, when you went in to have your IUD removed and find out you have twins? You were 5.5 weeks. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about pregnancy from 5.5 weeks to delivery, about how much time transpired and what were some of the things that you encountered in that pregnancy period time.
So from 5 weeks on, from that moment on, I was having to see high-risk pregnancy doctors, but also I was still continuing to have the same symptoms, constant bleeding. And my doctor had said it, likely if you're not losing baby B, you might be losing baby A, just the way that it's, the way that the baby is in there and, the placement of everything.
So you're feeling like the whole time that you're going to lose the babies.
I'm going to lose babies. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
From up until 12 and a half weeks, I quit bleeding. There was no more blood. And so I kept having to go to this high-risk pregnancy doctor. And every time I went, he would do all of the things, head to toe scan. Yes. Everything's fine. So it felt very reassuring, but also I would go home and not feel reassured.
Sure.
So after that, I kept having doctor's appointments up until 22 and 5 days. I started leaking a little bit. So there was no more complications up until 22 and 5. And I had a little bit of fluid leaking. And so I went to the doctor and they immediately hooked me up to everything at the hospital. And now, mind you, nowhere in between had we even discussed NICU, discussed anything, even up until 22.
Even though you were high risk and you were pregnant with multiples.
Yes. So it wasn't a question of, are you at the best hospital? So that'll come in later. But I was not, I just wasn't a thing. It wasn't expected. It wasn't, nobody had discussed this with us until we were at the hospital there at 22 and 5.
That's surprising because typically if you are, because you had two factors, you had high risk and you had multiples, that they would have at least said, you might have a stay in the NICU. So you had never seen a NICU?
Never.
Have you ever seen?
Never.
Okay.
Never.
So 22.5 babies, you're leaking fluid. And then when do you actually give birth, Valerie?
23 and 0.
2 days later. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So everything was fine. The doctor would come in, head to toe scan. Again, the words kind of stick with me. His words of everything is fine, head to toe. And it was Halloween, which I feel like these holidays come in very handy. So Halloween came. My husband is out with the kids. They're out trick-or-treating, doing their thing. And my best friend was with me at the time. And so the doctor came, did his sono. Everything looks great. Well, you'll be on bed rest till at least 36 weeks or more. And so I'm sitting there like, it's 23 and 0.
Which feels like an eternity.
Right. And so I get up to use the restroom because I had to go to the bathroom and my cord relapsed. And so I had to call in the nurse. I just felt something and said, I feel something. And nurse came in and she was, what do you mean you feel something? And I just remember her saying that. And immediately was put on, let's go. With that same doctor that came in, another one was on call. They were talking and he asked me, what do you want to do? And I just went in shock. I didn't know what, I didn't even know what he was referring to be honest with you. What do you mean? Are you going to save my babies? Are you not? And, this discussion again was not had. And so my doctor comes rushing in and she says, we're going to do everything we can to save your babies without even me having to speak that. She came in and said that. So, we went back to the emergency table. When I came out, my son Cristiano had passed. He was alive for 22 minutes. And then Cruz was immediately put on all the things, hooked up. I didn't even get to see him for a long time. And my husband was with Cruz and I was with Cristiano. When I got into the room, I had my family members there and they were all holding Cristiano, but I felt like I was in this, just like a cloud, and I could just see everybody, but I was not physically there. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I want to pause for a moment and give some honor to that, because I know it's hard to relive your hardest day. And I want to say thank you. I'm sure that there's a mom or a dad listening that really does feel that deeply.
Yeah.
So Valerie, how do you step into and hold some space for grief for one, knowing that the other one, you find out later, spends, has a 3-digit stay and 3-day stay in the NICU. How do you put your head around grieving one while trying to save the other? How did you do that?
Well, I think for me with this situation, I didn't honestly grieve a whole lot of Cristiano until we were all home. And I think because in that moment, I was supposed to bring 2 babies home.
Right.
You
were missing a car seat.
Right. So we, I honestly, that's when it hit me the most, I think. Coming home to my other 2 kids, I would say after that really helped. My kids are silly and they just made us laugh. And so when I would go home from the hospital or, after seeing Cruz, it was like I had to pretend like everything was normal,
And it's not normal. I mean, that's the whole, that's kind of the whole purpose of the season, is like, how do you find your new normal? Because I think most NICU parents would agree that normal feels like a fallacy, and it doesn't feel the same normal that you used to experience before you had a NICU baby is not the same normal when you come home. No. So Cruz had a crazy long stay, almost 300 days, 300 days in the NICU, almost a year. How did you prepare for him coming home, and what was life like when you got home with him? So I would have to praise our social workers that we had, because I tell people that all the time. They were incredible. They helped set us up at home before we got home. He came home with 24-hour nursing care, and that's a whole thing to navigate in itself. But he came home with all of the care. He had a trach, a gtube vent, full ventilator. He has since then, he is not on a vent anymore, and our hours have decreased. He does have a gtube, so we have to praise that. And how old is he now? He's 6. 6. Okay. Yes. And I think for coming home, we had to prepare a whole lot. We had to prepare a space for him and the nurses that would come, have our room set up a certain way. We had to he brought home oxygen. So we had to just make sure those things were in line. The fire department had to know that we had all these things. And then also for ambulance situation, for emergency, within the first week of him coming home, he actually had to go back to the hospital. So, the plan of having an ambulance, he was sick and had our rhino and had to go back for a couple days. So I'm curious, Valerie, as I listen to that, because I think there might be some people, maybe they're in a similar situation as you, or maybe they're not sure what may be coming for their baby. I think sometimes people may hear that and think like, I am ill-equipped to handle that. Like, there's no way that I could do that. There's no way that I have the love necessary, the finances, resources, and really just the emotional bandwidth. And how could I find myself, I guess, in a place to love my life, like to find joy in my life? But somehow you have been able to do that. And I'd like for you to share with people, how did you take what some people may say is unimaginable, and maybe it sounds terrible to them, but I look at you and I see what you share on social media, and there's so much joy there. And I think I'd like for you to take people from the despair part to the joy part. And how do you find that?
Well, I truly believe that even in grief, you can find joy. So throughout my journey, I I just was a believer in God and my faith. And but not only that is that I also tried to find the positive in something every single day, whether it was with Cruz. I mean, he would drop down to the 15 zeros while I'm holding him. He's about the size of my hand. I'm holding him on my chest, and he would desat to almost 15 and 12. So one of my praises was when I would hold him the next day. Oh, well, you didn't drop down to 15 today, Cruz. We're going to take that as a win.
Right.
So I think the more you train your brain to find that positive in the day, and I like to call them little tiny miracles because he was so tiny. He was 1 pound, 6 ounces. And so he is, my little tiny miracle. But each day I would find something just to praise, given the fact that I was going through so much grief with Cristiano and with Cruz. I mean, you go through grief process whenever you're in the NICU. And so I really tried to find the positive in each day. And it carried over to home to where I was with my children, and we talk about what we're thankful for the day. Who do we want to pray for? What is it that we can do better tomorrow? Those 3 things, just every single day, I would run through in my head, and it starts to build these like endorphins, I'm not sure, or dopamine, whatever you call it. I'm not a scientist. But it builds that, so that every day you wake up and you're thankful for something that
Right.
or every night you go to bed, maybe at night you say before you go to bed, I'm just so thankful that today he didn't get sick, we didn't have a hospital visit, and you can breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a choice. My grandmother used to say you have to dress for the day that you want to have. And I remember there were some days that felt excruciatingly
Mhm.
difficult, but I was like, I'm going to get up and take a shower. And I think it wasn't just the physical part of it, but it was like the confidence that it gave me to either ask somebody for help or to maybe see something in a new light. Or if you can get an extra couple of hours of sleep, it's amazing how much better life feels
Yes.
when you can get some sleep and it feels less overwhelming. But I think also recognizing that you don't have to do that alone. I mean, you can, but I think it's exponentially harder until you ask for help. Valerie, one part of your story that people may not hear, but I know I've heard you share before, is that you were prepared for grief long before you ever had your babies. So maybe give people an idea of some of the grief that you experienced and how you think it may have helped build that resiliency and that choice to love, whereas other people may not have chosen that path.
I think from the beginning, I had no control. I knew that it was not going to be my fault. I didn't have the control over it wasn't what I ate or what I was,
Right.
exercising. It was just something I had to say, I am out of this control. In my mind, I'm like, God, you're in control. But I'm like, anything that is happening um, is not going to be my fault. And I think that helps in a lot of grief because you always think, there's a what ifs. What if I
Sure.
went to a better hospital in my mind to where I was more equipped to maybe hold them in a little bit longer, or maybe go, Cruz could have had the immediate care instead of having to be transported 45 minutes. Those kinds of things hit you. Oh, normal, all normal. But it's like, I know that I did not have any control, but what I have control now is that I can be thankful for whatever it is that happened that day, and I can move forward with that. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I mean, and I know that we all have, like defining moments in our life that I think at the time maybe it happens and we think, oh, that was really hard, or oh, thank goodness we made it through that. And then we
Mhm.
realize maybe months or even years later how that thing that happened prepared us for the thing that we're going through now.
Oh,
And
sure.
that we weren't necessarily super equipped now, but we've been through something hard before. So it sort of builds your resiliency to go through hard things again. You're like, oh, I've been here before.
Could do this. Mm-hmm.
I can do this. I can do this. So if a mom is listening and thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if, like, how am I ever going to learn how to change a gtube, or how am I ever going to learn how to swap out my baby's trach, because the time has to be super fast when you do that. What would you tell that mom who feels overwhelmed, or dad? I don't want to exclude dads. A parent that feels overwhelmed, or like, I don't know if I can do this, and starting to doubt themselves.
You can do it. And I think that finding the group of people, like I went on Facebook and I found the trach groups or hand to hold, like they helped me through so much, with the virtual groups. And, you find women, men who are going through the same thing, find your support system, because I truly believe that, I struggled asking for help, but I truly believe that asking for help is going to get you to where you need to be, and you won't feel so alone. You definitely won't feel alone, because if this mom can do it, I can do it. If this person can, we can do it together. And I think you feel less alone whenever you find that support group.
Well, and you've been pretty transparent. I mean, you share things on social media, both on Instagram and over on TikTok. So I think I think back to all the years ago, 15 years ago, when we had our NICU baby. And social media was around, but certainly not like what it is right now. And I think there are valleys of social media, but there are also a lot of hills, in that it does allow you to connect with people or communities that you're like, hey, if I say this one thing about raising a NICU baby, no one's going to judge me, because that's their life too. So you find this natural connection point. So you did find, I know people might be listening and thinking, how does she have time to be? You're a special education teacher, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So how do you have time to do that? And I also know that you're connected to Hand to Hold as a peer mentor. So I guess what allowed you to step outside of yourself, outside of your family, and caring for Cruz, which I know he has a lot of medical needs, and find a way to turn around and say, like, hey, I want to help these other people. Like, how did you find the bandwidth for that?
I was a special education teacher first. And so it just happened that now we have Cruz, and I know I'm knowledgeable in that area. So that was really helpful. I am, again, just very supported by my team at work. And, I had to praise the people that I work with. They're very, very supportive. They have been with me from that day. I'm still at the same school, still here teaching. And then also at home, I think Hand to Hold really does a great job of allowing it to be virtual, to be able to pick up the phone. I can call the mentors when I'm driving to work, or, things like that. And so it's very flexible. I also am a part of a ministry that also helps provide biblical support to people in the NICU, childhood hospitalizations, or child loss as well. So I help with that. And again, all of it is kind of virtual. So I'm able to do it on the side. My husband and my family are very supportive whenever they know Mom's busy right now doing this. But I also think having Cruz, it's almost like you need a secretary for that too. But even though I don't, but you got to do all the medical appointments, the phone calls.
Oh my gosh. Yes. That's our other full-time job.
Yes. My calendar is true to me.
I like to say I have a full calendar. Every kid in our household has a different color, and our NICU baby is red. And there's a lot of red in my planner as to all the things that we have to do to keep up with that. So I'm going to end with this, because I think it's always great when you can maybe reflect back. So if you could go back, if Valerie 2025 could go back and talk to Valerie of 2018, what would you tell her?
Oh, goodness. I would say you can get through this. Find your tiny miracle today and every day.
It's a good way to end it. Valerie, thank you for sharing your heart and your story. It's really beautiful. It was a gift to have you. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you. Well, in today's 2-minute take, I think what I really want to focus on is this choice that Valerie made. She brought up something in the interview, and I think you've probably heard it on the podcast before, is sometimes guests will say, I can't imagine, or maybe someone in their life has said to them, I can't imagine how you did that. I don't know how you could do that. I don't think any of us signed on the dotted line when we became parents. Please give me the hardest thing, because I can imagine it and I will totally rock it like a boss. Most of us are like, I can't believe this is happening to me. But I loved that Valerie really focused on the choice, the choice to say, I don't know how we're going to do this. However, I'm going to surround myself with the people that I need to surround myself with. I'm going to reach out and ask for help. I am going to just do the next right thing. I'm just going to do what I can do today. I'm going to change the gtube. I'm going to call the insurance company. I'm going to visit with the specialist. Whatever it is that you need to do, I'm just going to do that. And after you do a lot of that, they sort of add up to a lot of really big things, but it's the daily grind. I call it the daily grind of love, the daily choice to say, okay, we're just going to do this next. And I think as I was listening to our interview and reflecting on some of the things that Valerie said, I think that was my big takeaway was you just keep doing the thing right in front of you, however big or small it feels in the moment. And then when you can look back weeks later, months later, years later, it feels so big because it is so big. Not only have you grown, but your child has grown too. And while it doesn't necessarily mean that things have gotten easier, you have just gotten wiser and smarter and probably stronger, sometimes by choice and sometimes not by choice, but that you chose to love and you chose to do it in small ways. So that was my big take-home message today. I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Valerie. We have more great ones coming. I love when y'all rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us over on YouTube if you want to put a face with a voice. Definitely follow us over at Hand to Hold on YouTube. So we've got way more coming this particular season. So don't go anywhere, because next time you're going to hear a little bit about this.
I've seen so much just as the person caring from the other side, that babies that quite honestly, they pulled off life support, right? They pulled because they thought, all right, there's too much wrong. Well, then survived and thrived. And I mean, it's amazing. So the good thing, yes, I definitely want to reiterate for parents, if you're in the room and the ophthalmologist says, okay, I'm worried there is some retinopathy, prematurity, that is not cause for alarm. Your head doesn't have to, because mine would go there with my 3 kids. Okay, now we got to do surgery. Now we got to do this. Now we got to do that.